He pulls in right behind the bridge, he lays her down. She says, "Gee, my life's a funny thing, am I still too young?" Da-na-da-na-na. He took her then and there, she took his hands, took his babies, took him minutes, took her nowhere. Heaven knows she would taken anything but all night. She was a young American. Oh, yes. That was a hell of a song whose title, Young Americans, relates tangentially to the incredible story and speculative evolution sci-fi extravaganza we are about to discuss today. Welcome to the CM Cosman channel, everybody, where today we will be looking at an interesting glimpse of post-human, post-apocalyptic representation in the immortal sci-fi author Poul Anderson's Winter of the World. Especially the younger members of my audience seem to be painfully unaware that the world, and especially North America and the English-speaking world, currently hosts untapped deposits of incredible sci-fi books in second-hand bookshops, thrift sales, even unlikely places like hotel lobbies and cafes where they are used as decoration. And this is actually how I came in possession of my copy of Poul Anderson's Winter of the World. Let us just say that it was used as decoration in a place where nobody will understand it, nobody will read it, and nobody will even realize that it's gone. I strongly encourage every viewer of my channel not to go lift stuff, but actually to go to second-hand bookshops and thrift stores or yard sales or wherever and really give these books a try, especially with names like Harry Harrison, Poul Anderson, Jack Vance, Robert Silverberg, Theodore Sturgeon, James Blish, Sprague de Camp, not to mention legendary names like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. Especially with these names, the impossible seems to have happened. You really have incredible stories with a strong dose of action adventure, but also with incredible efforts of world building available to you at dirt cheap prices. Heck, if you can't even be bothered to read actual books anymore, like some of you iPad babies out there, you can actually find free audiobook readings on YouTube and other platforms. If you're interested in speculative evolution, creatures, or world building in general, there's really no excuse not to read these books. So I really recommend going to a second-hand bookshop, picking up a few of these books and just diving in. There are some really underappreciated, wonderful stories out there, and when you read them in an actual paper book, the stories really stay with you for years and years. Anyway, now let's turn our attention to the matter at hand. Yes, this is a podcast about post-human Americans in a new ice age, as told in Poul Anderson's Winter of the World. At first sight, this book seems pretty straightforward and simple. In fact, I think in the hands of another author it would be a very boring and predictable read. But this is a book by Poul Anderson. Note this name, P-O-U-L Anderson. And Anderson is nothing if not a master world builder. When you read his writing, you can really tell that he enjoys crafting the world and dropping hints about its past and its details from the everyday conversations and actions that people engage in. So yeah, this is where the author really makes a difference. So here is the main outline of the world. It is tens of thousands of years in the future, maybe even 100,000 or more, or even 1,000,000. Nobody really knows. Our story is set in North America, and right from the get-go, here's a really nice detail. When other authors write post-apocalyptic science fiction, they usually like to drop hints in the names of places, hinting that these names are garbled versions of the places where we have in the present day. So there might be a place called New York, but turns out, hey, it's New York. Or a place called America, which is ha ha ha, America. Get it? Get it? I think this is a very novice and kind of stupid mistake to make, and of course Anderson doesn't make it, but I've actually seen a retroactive version of this mistake, which was so dumb, so stupid that I just have to take a side quest and tell you about it. This comes from the Stephen Baxter book Evolution, which otherwise is an okay-ish read. And it is a very ambitious work which tries to serve us stories from the origin of humanity into our far, far future. And one of these short stories in the grand human narrative in Stephen Baxter's Evolution comes from the present-day Çatalhöyük, which is in Turkey. It was the site of one of the first settled cities in the world that we know about. Okay, so keep this name in mind, Çatalhöyük. Now, in Baxter's fictionalized telling of the place, and this is supposed to be like one of the first agrarian cities in the world, and it's like a weird and dark and slightly dystopian place, we are told about life in Çatalhöyük from the perspective of the last hunter-gatherers in that area. Anyways, and in that story, they call the fucking city Katahuk, which is Çatalhöyük garbled retroactively. Now, if you have more than 2 brain cells, you would realize this is extremely stupid, and it kind of is like a fly in the ointment kind of thing. It spoils the entirety of the rest of the book. I mean, Stephen Baxter has other problems, but yeah. So here is the gist of the matter. Çatalhöyük just means forked hill. It's not some sort of derivation from the ancient, legacy, mystical past name of the place. Katahöyük, get the fuck out of here. Look, Çatalhöyük is just the name that Turkish people gave to this basically hill, and nobody even suspected that there was a city under it. Years and years later, there was an excavation, and turns out, well, there was a city under it, and it was of some historic importance. But anyways, it's like writing about ancient British history and inventing a castle or a kingdom named Sutton Hoo. If you know, you know. But anyways, back to the winter of the world. So the place names have no relation to anything we have today. In fact, more history has elapsed from the present day until the setting of the book than it has passed before. So the North American continent is called Andalin, South America is called Tuokar, Africa is called Eflis, the Indian Ocean is called the Feline Ocean, South Africa is called Fortress Cape, okay, maybe some similarity or echoes of history there. New Zealand, which in the book is the center of a vibrant civilization, is called Almeric. Australia is called Oranstein, and the greater state which rules basically Oceania is called Killimarik, and Asia is called Owang, and so on and so forth. All the names have been changed. You know, you can't find hints of what has taken place. These details continue in North America, where the story takes place. There is one big city, maybe built on the remnants of New Orleans, but nobody really knows. It's called Arvannet, and other places have names like Harvar or Rung or the Idis Mountains, which is the name given in this far future to the Appalachian Mountains. Now, if the author was really naive and kind of a fool, he or she could have called these the Appalach Mountains. So the reader would go, oh, that's how it works. But no, of course, Poul Anderson does not make this mistake. Throughout the story, we are given hints that history on North America is extremely deep, old and vast. Empires have risen and fallen, and nothing is recognizable in the present day. And this is shown to us not only explicitly with big maps of the world in the beginning of the book, but also through many, many little details. I mean, you just have to read the book. I'm not going to summarize it for you, but one detail I really enjoyed comes from a description from Arvanet, the main big, very old city in the book. It has been an independent city-state for centuries, and now, only recently, a kind of new empire has taken possession of it. But a little detail in the description of the city tells us that the glass on the palace windows is so old it has actually rusted, or some sort of chemical reaction has taken place, and now the windows have this really strange purplish sheen, which only comes through exposure to the elements after centuries. There are other more foreboding little details too. For example, in certain parts of the landscape, there are these big glass craters which nobody understands. They're just part of the geography. But now, with the slow advent or rebirth of the sciences, people are beginning to understand what these things may have been all about. And I am reading from the book. He had met things like that before, scattered around Orenstein, and seen accounts of them in eastern Owang and western Andalin. So there are these glass craters in East Asia and Western America. Something sometime had scooped craters 3 or 4 miles wide out of the earth. Digging beneath the soil, which had blown in afterward, people had discovered fused layers, cracked by the frosts and the roots of millennia, but not too far gone for the bowls to hold their shapes. Deeper down were occasionally relics of ancient cities, or these might occur in mounds on a periphery. This had led scientists in Kilimiark to conjecture that when the ice marched from the poles, civilization destroyed itself in struggle for dwindling resources by unleashing powers which none today had mastery of. Opposing thinkers derided this theory. More frequently than not, excavation indicated that the catastrophes had happened in uninhabited areas. Who would have bombarded those? Besides, to postulate world-wrecking energies in human hands was baseless sensationalism. Indeed, evidence for substantial advances and retreats of the ice was new, slight, and controversial. It came chiefly from coastal lands, especially the coral range, which must formerly have been submerged. Where had the water gone but into the glaciers? Well, the conservatives argued back. Terrestrial forces might have elevated the continents or dug pits in the ocean beds, perhaps millions rather than thousands of years in the past. They might have also made the craters, or perhaps meteorites were responsible for the latter. Since Viklis Balolok, that's the name of a scientist which never gets mentioned again, it's kind of like that world's Galileo and Newton combined, maybe. Anyways, since Viklis Balolok first proved that shooting stars are stones from outer space, many had been identified, several very large. A rain of huge meteorites could well have brought down global society, leaving a remnant of ignorant peasants and savages to start over. So stuff like this goes on and on for paragraphs in between the otherwise boring details of the story. And to me, this is where the meat of the book really is. You really see Poul Anderson's mind working on his world building, and you can really tell that he enjoys what he's doing. In fact, sometimes characters drop so much lore about their world that it kind of destabilizes the story. Sometimes characters speak more like textbooks rather than real people. But that's okay. I think this is a saving grace of this book. If it had been written in any other way, it would have been a forgettable post-apocalyptic story. But now you really see Poul Anderson's mind at work. You can tell that he knows about the history of the sciences, how the development of science connects to societal developments. And then you kind of loop this back into the present day. And you see there are similar discussions today in the sciences and in fringe circles too. I mean, you might be familiar with this thing called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which postulates that human civilization may actually have gotten an earlier start, but around 12,900 years ago, there was some sort of a cosmic cataclysm, maybe a comet impact, which effectively ended the last ice age, started a new wave in climate change, led to the extinction of all the great late Pleistocene animals such as mammoths and giant sloths and saber-toothed tigers, and changed the world for good. And in fact, in the earliest iterations of this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, you have actually papers with titles like Terrestrial Evidence of a Nuclear Catastrophe in Paleo-Indian Times, written in 2001. Go look this up. This paper says that the entire Great Lakes region in North America was subjected to particle bombardment and a catastrophic nuclear wave of radiation. And who knows? I mean, I don't know if this thing really happened that way, or maybe it was a meteor impact, or maybe it was something nuclear. But the point I'm trying to drive home is that this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis was formalized at least in the early 2000s. Now, the book we are studying today, The Winter of the World, was written in 1975. And the fictional discussion about these glass craters in that book is almost a one-to-one, step-by-fucking-step precursor of these Younger Dryas impact hypotheses. Heck, in the more fringe edges of that line of study, you got the bleed over into things like the Tartarian extinction conspiracy theories and stuff like that. It's really strange how science fiction has the power, almost Nostradamus-like power, to prefigure scientific discussion. Just incredible. Go look these up. I mean, it's a wild field of study, and that's all I'll say on that matter for now. But anyways, back to the book. This is not all, by the way. I mean, there are other little details that with just a few words and phrases open up entire worlds of possibilities. For example, one of the characters is trying to navigate when they're abandoned, and he looks for Mars, and here's how the text goes. He found Mars aloft and dwelt on its bluish brilliance until he didn't know why. A memory swam from the depths of him, a thing he had heard in Nafs. This is a place which doesn't figure before or after in the story, by the way. It's just another continent, another location in the travels that this character, Joserek, had, okay? A thing he had heard in Nafs from an astrologer who sought out forgotten records and pictures in tombs of forgotten kings. That man claimed Mars was formerly red, thus they had seen it who lived before the ice came. Now that's really, really fascinating, just with this little paragraph. By the way, you know, this mystical guy in Nafs or wherever, the location doesn't even feature on the map of the world we are given at the beginning of the book. So Nafs must be a very obscure, almost mystical place. And with just this little paragraph, we learned that something has happened to Mars. It's now blue. Maybe it has been terraformed by the last humans escaping the world. But then again, if you could terraform a planet, you could just hold back the ice age, or somebody else terraformed it, or something else happened to the world. Who knows? Before the ice came, Mars was red. Now it's blue. Because of this little detail, I also thought that maybe Poul Anderson was trying to extend this world. Extend this into a series of books maybe. Perhaps a sequel to The Winter of the World could involve an invasion from Mars. Who knows? Who knows? But that's not all. There are also little cute details too. Like cats, for example. When Joserek is traveling across the ice-ridden North American wasteland, he and other people see this weird little cat. And here's how it goes. The garment was gorgeous. What is this white fur? Joserek asked. I've never quite seen a pelt like it. Walled cat, said Tamavio. Joserek said. He had glimpsed the small wild felines, obviously related to the house pets of the Kilimarkians. But the Kilimarkian cats were drab-hued for camouflage. Is it? Damn, he didn't know how to say albino. But Tamavio responds, oh, it's a winter phase coat, of course. The answer suggested pride, probably because the beasts were hard to catch and very valuable. For some reason, Joserek lay long in his bedroll thinking about that. He had met cats around the world. Scientists theorized that this was because civilization before the ice had kept them, and certain uniformities in certain fragments suggested it had been global. So cats everywhere, but he knew no cats whose color changed with the seasons, as did the ermines or Antarctic hares. Then the walled cat was a new genus. But what did new mean? In numberless thousands of years, in weathers that shifted decade by decade as the glaciers growled from the poles, natural selection might well become a whiplash. Genetic drift too, maybe, among populations cut off from their kin. He recalled an island where everybody had 6 fingers, or dark skin, snow-white hair, and brass-colored eyes on Mulven Roa of Iki. That's another character. Once again, not a big character at all, just a mention. Joserek thought to himself, well, I am no hereditarian savant. I've just read a little, mainly after I went on whale patrol and started wondering how such marvels ever came to be. Eventually, he slept. In his dreams, elephants trumpeted. They were not like those he had seen in tropical Owang or Eflis, that's tropical Asia and Africa for you. These elephants in his dreams were hairy and bore immense arches of tusk and walked a tundra which the ice cliffs bounded. So there. A lot to unpack with just a little cat contemplation, huh? Bro stays awake thinking about cats and almost has a eureka moment where he formulates the theory of evolution. By thinking about cats, the lead character also shows us how humanity's global civilization impacted the world. I mean, just think about it. If humanity got extinct and an alien race came to explore the world thousands of years later, they probably would find feral cats in Australia, despite the best efforts of people to eradicate them. And there's also an extra polish of realism added with little details such as how Joserek has no word to convey what albinism means to this other character who's a more less quote-unquote civilized native. Little details really make the book work, and I really don't care about the final conflict or like the big battle scenes, but I just want to read these characters having thoughts about their world and trying to figure it out. And plus he also has a mystical time travel moment too, this Joserek character. Before falling asleep, he has visions of woolly mammoths in the tundra. So really, really nice, lovely stuff. And little details like this, they really kind of lock your mind into the story. They really stay with you. And if you're into writing imaginary fiction of any sort, I think these are really useful things to look at. Everyday life, even the most boring details in it, really have a way of telling us the greater narrative of history, and you can look at your own daily life to find little hints like that too. Even things as mundane as which side of the road you drive on can really tell you a lot about the historic setting in a certain place. For example, if you're in Turkey, you drive on the left side of the car. If you go to Cyprus, which is right off of Turkey, the position of the wheel changes. Why? Because at the advent of the automobile, Cyprus was a British dependency, and it was the British who introduced the cars there. So little details like this, this book is really full of them, and it's wonderful. In fact, you could almost argue that the story is kind of an afterthought, and it's these little details that matter. And well, if you enjoy this sort of thing, you will really enjoy The Winter of the World. But let's now dive even deeper into the state of affairs in this far future. So the world has come into the grip of a second or maybe a third ice age. Everything has been erased and rebuilt again. The level of civilization is at a degree comparable to the Victorian era, but the most quote-unquote civilized polity on that world is centered around Oceania, the Kilimarkians, and we don't get to see much about them except for the lead character, who is actually a Kilimarkian spy in America. Yeah, I know it's no longer called America, it's called Andalin, but I'm not gonna deal with that. So America it is. And America is ruled by a sort of horse nomad empire centered around the Gulf of Mexico. I guess we're meant to call it the Gulf of America now. And this empire is called the Rahidian Empire, but I'm just gonna call it the empire. So this empire consists of nomadic horse people who are just beginning to settle into an imperial existence, rather like the Turks, but there are no direct analogues. They have been horse ranchers and horse warriors, but for the past 2 generations, they have been developing gunpowder weapons, more advanced warfighting technologies such as cannons, rifles, muskets, and the like. They have been slowly conquering the coasts of the Gulf of Mexico, and they're advancing up north. And this big city I told you about, Arwanet, was like a sort of independent city-state, one of the biggest, if not the biggest and the oldest in America. And the empire has just conquered this big city, Arwanet. Mind you, Arwanet is probably the northernmost big real city in America in the setting, because further north, this is the Ice Age. So further north, the ice begins, and almost all of present-day United States is a sort of wilderness, a kind of Edenic Cro-Magnon-style wilderness where game abounds, nature is bountiful, and there are also indigenous people there in the form of the Roga VII, who are a loose and uncontrollable association of wild tribes. On first sight, we feel that they are maybe analogous to, well, the Native American First Nations, but as we read on and on, we see that there's more to them than meets the eye. They are not noble savages, but actually have a quite sophisticated degree of technology. They don't build settlements, but they're not purely nomadic either. They seem to gather in these outposts, which are like university commons in a way. There are books, there's heating, there's, well, stoves and other artifacts. So they're not purely backwards. But the Rogaviki seem to pick and choose which technologies they would like to adapt for their life. And they don't farm, but instead they hunt, and they strangely seem to be able to control their population. More about that later, because one of the lead characters in this book is a irresistible Rogaviki lady by the name of Donya, and she gets to have a lot of adventures with the book's other protagonist, whose name is Joserek. And remember a bit back where I told you there's another nation on this world which is quote-unquote more advanced? Yeah, the Kilimarkians, who basically have something like a early 20th century understanding of science. They have hints about how nature works, how evolution may work, and they have the beginnings of life sciences in place. Well, our other hero comes from the Kilimarkian Empire or polity, whatever you choose to call it, and his name is Joserek. And Joserek and this Donia character have a lot of adventures, and the antagonist in the story is a guy called Sidir, who is an imperial grand vizier who rules the newly conquered Arvanet and plans to raid out from Arvanet up north to subjugate the Roga VII people, tame their lands, and make settled civilized people out of these wayward and quote-unquote backwards barbarians. In fact, at one point this character Sidir says he is explicitly fighting for civilization, almost for like a manifest destiny sort of cause, to bring civilization up to the wild wastes of the north. Oh, and earlier on in the book, this Sidir character was a lover with Donia, who seems to have these incredibly alluring qualities. I mean, we will get there. We will see how this character is represented and what it actually means for the post-human angle in the book. But yeah, long story short, a lot of stuff happens. Evil empire, Sidir captures this Donia girl who's from this wild Roga VII tribe. They become lovers for a while, they just vibe for a while. And then this Kilimarkian spy, Joserek, comes into the picture. He helps Donia escape. They become lovers too, and there's a lot of lovemaking in this book, and it's all told in this sort of kind of tacky but also juicy 1970s immediate aftermath of the hippie revolution kind of angle. We will get there. I will tell you all about it. Anyway, so they become lovers, but then Donia joins her people, and the protagonist Joserek ends up helping Donia's people, the Roga VII, resist the evil empire. There's a set-piece battle, and the bad guys lose, and bish bash bosh, that's the story. Now, as I told you before, in any other author's hands, this would have been quite a rookie book, a forgettable book, but it's in all the details that we see something deeper going on. And at the end of the book, there's a grand reveal about the secrets of the Roga VII. Oh yeah. I've been talking non-stop for more than half an hour. God, that was a fresh drink of water I sorely needed. But before we dive deeper into the world of the Roga VII, you know what else I sorely need? Yes, your Patreon donations and your merch store purchases. So please don't withhold them. And let's look deeper into the society, the sexuality, and even the reproductive dynamics of these Roga VII people, because true to his form, Poul Anderson gives intense and extreme details about them all. When you first start reading the book, you feel like they're gonna be just another stock nation of noble savages, but as our lead character, Joserek, ventures deeper into America, he encounters more of the Roga VII, and they don't quite seem to be the stand-ins for Native Americans that one first takes them to be. For example, they don't have cities, but they do build structures. Dotted around the wilderness and the rich nature of the North American landscape are these things called stations, which are described as follows. A station was a set of independent businesses run by single women and by those rare men who, for a variety of reasons, did not fit into normal Roga VII life. A station sold goods and services which mostly required a group of sedentary people the year around. It was a hostel, a market, and a special factory for an immense area. Travelers in particular, Roga VII did a lot of individual traveling, could find here what they required en route. A major activity was the swapping of jaded ponies for fresh horses. Any difference in bargained out values or the cost of any outright purchase might be met with cash. There was a lot of imperial currency in circulation. I just love this about Poul Anderson. From one branch to another, my own mind operates in a similar way too. You explain one thing, and then when you're doing that, you come across this other thing which also needs to be explained. So you have to go there, and then you build that up, and you loop that back up, and you come up to another point which, I love this. I love writing like this, I love talking like this, I love telling stories like this, and I love reading stuff like this. But yeah, back to the Roga VII stations. Or it might be paid in kind, so there's barter. Or it might be settled by a note such as the one Donia had signed, essentially a bill of exchange. Her household would redeem it upon presentation. Probably it would pass through many hands before it reached its goal. But what if the payment never comes? Jozerek asked. We don't count things as narrowly in the Northlands as the folk do elsewhere, was the reply. We live in too much abundance for a load of goods, either way, to make a difference. And here we see that the Roga VII are far from primitive hunter-gatherers. They actually have a lot of sophisticated technology. They can make a lot of devices. They can distill alcohol. They have printing presses, and they actually publish books and read a lot in these stations. Unfortunately, Poul Anderson does not tell us how the Roga VII school their children, if there are schools they go to, or if all the kids are privately schooled. We don't know. But one thing we do know, and I'm going back to the reading, apparently all trade and all manufacturing was private. There were no guilds or governments to control it, no laws to forbid anything. In fact, later on in the book, our lead character Jozerek does a lot of bedtime thinking about the manners and the societal structure of the Roga VII, and this is how he thinks to himself. He's in the bed. The problem is, long-range public benefit is apt to conflict with immediate private or bureaucratic advantage and go by the board. That's why common lands get overgrazed, forests recklessly logged off, rivers polluted, useful wildlife exterminated, trade clogged, progress stifled by regulations and taxes under any system known: tribal, feudal, monarchic, timocratic, democratic, theocratic, capitalist, militaristic, traditionalistic, collectivist, any. But these Roga VII are true anarchs. They make no pretensions to altruism. They don't even have a word for it. A particular fellowship could gain strength, extra hands, and riches by increasing its size. It could scoff at outside disapproval, for it is already self-sufficient and there are no authorities to check it. And soon every clan could do likewise or risk becoming a victim. But nevertheless, the Roga VII don't do that. They somehow live as ideal and prim anarcho-capitalists without stepping on each other's toes. So this Jozerek keeps thinking, what is the factor that keeps their way of living stable? It must have a stronger grip on each and every person of them than a wish for the well-being of their descendants possibly can, especially since they don't agree what that well-being is. Some would like to trade more with the outside world, some would want to isolate themselves, some would want a lot of firearms to make hunting easier, some would be afraid of getting too dependent on their suppliers, and on and on and on. But everybody in Roga VII society is free to do whatever he or she pleases, short of provoking fatally many clanmates into breaking off relations. Remember, this is one character's ruminations about society as he catches bouts of sleep in between travel and adventure. It's just wonderful. But none of that hardly happens. Jozerek keeps on thinking. The only serious violence I've seen so far or heard among the Roga Wiki relates to the outrunners. These are another story altogether. They're outcasts and they are pathological cases who for this reason or that hate the rest. Otherwise, I have seen no wars, no feuds. Thievery is rare, and fights are confined to bare-handed blows. Of course, these people aren't saints. They're haughty, they're greedy, they lie and cheat shamelessly in making a deal. They don't show compassion outside of their immediate fellowship, but they have no creed, nothing but a sort of ethic, and it is bluntly pragmatic. Furthermore, the Roga Wiki are wide open to foreign ideas, but they remain true to themselves, century after century. How? It shouldn't be humanly possible. Just wonderful stuff. And at this junction, you see that this Roga Wiki thought exercise is almost like an opposite end, anarcho-capitalist, anarcho-primitivist version of another thought exercise in science fiction literature, one which came later with the Domination of the Draka, written by S.M. Sterling. It's a whole other alternative history world, a really dark what-if that combines slavery and industrial civilization together. You should go read it. It's a wonderful and very dark series. But yeah, looping back on the matter at hand with the Roga Wiki, you can really see Poul Anderson trying to make a truly anarchic society work. And he goes through all the reasons why anarchy or liberal pretensions have failed in the past, but somehow, through the use of plot magic maybe, the Roga Wiki keep it going. Society is not the only way the Roga Wiki differ vastly from outsiders. Another big difference they have is in their sexuality. Throughout the book, we see that the Roga Wiki have this casual, open-ended, polyandrous relationships in which a woman marries a number of different men. It's a kind of relationship that piece of shit human bag of garbage Stephen Bonnell, also known as Destiny, maybe would have aspired to, but since this is science fiction and, well, later on there's a big plot reveal, it seems to work with Roga Wiki society. These open marriages between one woman and a lot of different guys who are just very quiet, capable, and they do what they're told. This is not to say they are cucks or soy jacks, they're not these okay honey types in the present day sense, but somehow the whole arrangement works. Everybody is okay with it. We are told that somehow the Roga Wiki woman can choose whether to have children or not, and the lead character asks the other lead character, Donya, well, I guess you have some sort of contraception or something, but she says, no, we just know. We just know, man. Furthermore, when it comes to sexuality, at least Roga Wiki women are incredibly sexual, as it is written in the book. Remember, this book was written in the 1970s. The sexual revolution was at its high note. Contraceptives for women were widely available for the first time in almost all of history that we know of. And sexually transmitted diseases had not proliferated like they would in the later decades. So Donya, the Roga Wiki character in this book, is extremely sexual and alluring, but she's also strong and vicious, and she's got almost animalistic traits. She's like a vixen, a tigress, and a snake all together rolled into one entity in bed. Furthermore, throughout the book, as Jozerek and Donya encounter more Roga Wiki camps, other women come up to Jozerek and say, hey, you're kinda hot, let's hook up together. And to Jozerek's extreme surprise, Donya is also okay with this. In fact, in a few cases, she actually says things to the effect of, oh, I got a headache anyways, you just go around and hook up with these girls and stuff like that. It's all very, very titillating, and it's all very mystifying. It's titillating because, well, this book is a product of its time, and remember, the audience of this book would probably be lots of young men, so The lead character is a regular Joe, and he goes into this crazy world of adventure and has sex with loads of willing women who are completely okay with it. So yeah, so there's the titillation, but this being Poul Anderson, there's also a mystifying side, because Jozerek actively wonders how this society can hold itself up together without a stable family structure. And he doesn't understand how the women are able to withhold having children. He doesn't understand how their population does not expand uncontrollably and how they don't press on natural resources. And so the anarchism, the sophistication, and the sexual liberation of the Roga Wiki kind of seem to complement each other in creating a stable society. In the very least, thanks to Poul Anderson's ruminating style, the suspension of disbelief is complete. And yeah, the sex is quite wild and crazy, but also to Poul Anderson's credit, the way he writes about it is never crass or macho, you know. I mean, a lovemaking scene goes like this. They made love wildly by moonlight, then tenderly again at dawn, and once crazily, while heaven blazed, roared and cataracted with thunderstorm, events like single waves on an endless rhythm of miles. Here we also have a case, maybe one of the few ever, of dirty talk being recorded in a fictional post-apocalyptic setting. When they are making wild love in the thunderstorm, Donya breaks out into something approaching poetry, saying, "Oh, terrible sweetness of stallions, come neighing, strike lightning from stones, an unmountable mount." So, yeah. I'm not laughing at this, I'm laughing with this. This is maybe a part of the book that did not age in a cool way, but it's okay. I mean, look, sexuality is a driving instinct, and it's very natural for characters to be motivated that way. Especially in this book, sexuality plays a great role, because we learn that not just Donya, but Roga Wiki women in general have this extremely strange effect on men from the civilized world. People grow addicted to them. In the book, both the villain and the hero get to be lovers with Donya, and they're all hooked up on her. They can't stop thinking about her. She gets under their skin. She gets into their minds. They're like, oh my god, I gotta forget this girl. Especially the villain, because his army faces Donya's people towards the end. He's like, I shouldn't kill her. I love her, but is this love? And then the villain sees Donya together with Jozerek, and he goes crazy. He goes really jealous. He says, she's a slut. I'm gonna kill her and her entire people, and so on and so forth. In a really fascinating plot detail, somewhere later on in the story, okay, don't ask me how. Long story short, the Empire goes into a campaign into Roga Wiki lands, but a band of Roga Wiki, led by our hero Jozerek, break into the big capital city, Arvanet, executing some 4D chess sort of masterstroke. So the army of the Empire has to return from the Roga Wiki lands to take back control of the city, therefore foiling their plan. It's really kind of irrelevant how this happens. You just need to read the book to find out. But here's a minor detail, okay? Jozerek, Donya, and some other Roga Wiki break into the palace of the governor of this ancient city, which has had its own independent culture and tradition for hundreds of years before the Empire took over. And there they meet this really old man who's like the emperor of this timeless city. And he tries to make a last stand. And I kid you not, the last thing he ever does before dying is this, okay? Okay, so imagine you're the titular ruler of this ancient city with the proud heritage of independence. Almost somebody like Michael Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor. And he's captured by these Roga Wiki soldiers and our heroes. Now, instead of going out fighting or saying something cool or trying to resist somehow, okay, the emperor asks one of the Roga VII women who captured him, "Oh, wait, which clan are you from?" And dumbfounded, the female warrior says, "I'm from this and that clan." And the emperor, who is like maybe a century old, okay, he's like, "Oh my god, I used to know a Roga VII girl like you. She must be as old as I am now. Her name was Brusa. She lived around Pine Lake, that girl." Oh man. And then, remembering this Roga VII girl, the emperor draws out a pistol and shoots himself. So he was thinking about her all along. You know, these Roga VII women are like these rosebud moments for almost every male character from the civilized world in this book, and it's just fascinating. In the end, it all gets resolved with a really strange and revealing plot twist. But stepping aside from the narrative now, I think the Roga VII embody something about how young Americans saw themselves, at least in the 1970s. They're not bound by petty rules, you know, they don't work for the man. They are liberated, they are not constrained by petty laws, they just do what they kinda wanna do. They go with the flow, and you know what? The flow is better than those city-living squares stifled up in their boring towns and shit. They're sexually liberated too. You can hang out with whoever. Doesn't really matter as long as you're in touch with nature. They get to have stallion lighting sex in a thunderstorm, you know. It's no boring missionary style for these guys out there. Fuck bareback in a mountain stream. And the best of all, you don't have to get kids. You can have sex just to have fun. Have fun, yeah. Get it on. But that's not all. These guys are mobile, you know, they can move around, but they're not ruthless. They got a clan, they got a gang, they got a tribe, a posse that watches out for them. Always. It's not the family you have, it's the family you choose. They don't need much, but if they need it, they can print books, distill the best liquor, sew the best clothes. It's just about wanting it. And believe me, I kid you not, go ask a boomer, they still think they are the Roga VII. They really believe that they have this figured out that way. And the selfish, fucked up world that line of thinking led to. Fucking Roga VII ass boomers with 2 cars, 2 houses, $1 million in the bank, and kids struggling to pay rent. You don't hate them enough. Just take it from me. You don't hate them enough. Okay, let's snap back to reality though and focus on the task we got on hand. Let's tackle the mystery of Roga VII in Poul Anderson's Winter of the World. You know, as our hero Jozerek thinks about these people and their impossible ways and their impossible sexuality, unlike the boomers, the Roga VII can make it all work out, because it turns out, as you may have realized by now, as hinted by the previous evolutionary train of thought about the cats and everything, it turns out that the Roga VII are a distinct new species of humanity. They are, in effect, American post-humans in a second ice age. And he realizes that despite his big love, his endless, deep, infatuated love for Donya will never truly reciprocate this. In fact, earlier on in the book, Donya gives out quite a warning saying this can never work out. Roga VII and outsiders are not compatible at all. In fact, when I'm in your cities, Donya says, the weird smell gets to me and I can't tolerate it. So, putting 2 and 2 together, combining his experiences with the Roga VII and his understanding of evolution, plus his experience with cat distribution maybe, Jozerek realizes that the girl he loved belongs to another species altogether and quietly leaves. Months and months later, he somehow sends a letter to Donya explaining everything that he knows, and it's kind of a revelation for the reader too. And now we're gonna read select bits from Joserek's love letter and confession to Donya from the Winter of the World. And once again, Poul Anderson's inimitable, overtly explanatory style makes itself really visible, but it's an acquired taste and I love it. And here we go. Let's see how Joserek explains his discovery that this girl comes from a different species of humanity altogether. Do you remember the day you returned to Thunder Kettle from hunting and we walked out on the prairie together? You said there had never been and could never be a whole life shared by Roga VII and an outlander. Suddenly, I saw how this might be. Not superstition, not tradition, not man-made barriers, but the very truth. Since then, I've lived in the very idea, explored it, tried to deny it, then opened my eyes and seen it everywhere around me, and finally gathered my nerve and set out to chart it as far as it goes. I'm not quite the first in this territory. There could scarcely be after untold centuries, and I have learned a deal from books and from talk with knowledgeable men. Don't worry, I did not talk about your name. So Joserek says back home he had conferences with scientists and put his theory of evolution to the test. Okay. However, maybe I am by chance the first person who came into understanding this, who came to know something about evolution and used to looking at life that way. So it's like the Newton's apple moment, but only for the evolutionary theory. And instead of a falling apple, you have a wild adventure and a big tragic love story with this alien girl. You were so interested when we talked about this, and how whales and dolphins, for instance, are cousins in one household of animals which return to the sea, while seals and walruses belong to another. And penguins, by the way, here the word penguins is indicated in parentheses to denote words that Donya and the Roga VII have no words for. So a lot of phrases in this letter that her lover writes to Donya are in parentheses because it's either because the Roga VII don't know what they are in case of penguins or have no concept for those. And those are words like government, diplomatic mission, treaty, admiralty, colonies, conquests, so on and so forth. And it's in another twist of world building, beautiful twist of world building, we realize that the Roga VII don't even have concepts for these hierarchical words, and instead Joserek has to write them out in his own language. Anyways, back to the letter and Joserek's evolutionary poignant love story. And penguins are birds which did likewise, although the reptile ancestor of birds and mammals must have died eons ago. You were so interested that I'm sure it stayed in your head, whatever else you may have forgotten of what I've been writing about. Donya nodded to herself. She sent her glance around among the minnows, insects, a frog, a lizard, a robin, her horse. Finally, she ran a hand across her own body. Wow! Girl is getting evolutionarily self-conscious thanks to Joserek's autistic writing. What a charmer, what a silver-tongued wordsmith, that guy. Okay, let's keep reading. Man is an animal too. We can see how he and the, in parentheses, monkeys have a common forebear, and we can see how he has kept on evolving in his separate homes around the world. Else, why would he wear so many hues and faces? But these things do not go deep in our flesh, no deeper than for different breeds of the dog tribe. Like wolf, coyote, and hound, folk of several races can beget fertile offspring. They can be brought up to any human way of life and taught, says Joserek. Obviously, this is Poul Anderson's caveat when he's talking about races and evolution, because not like that, bro, not like that. Animals have races, but people, not like that, bro. But except for you, Donya. Look, race, ethnicity, and the biological sciences, they're a tricky mix in the best of times, and it's very, very easy to subvert this for more discriminatory purposes. And Poul Anderson is just covering his bases here to not accidentally say anything racist or eugenicist. Anyways, I love this about Poul Anderson. He goes off context, and that's what makes his books such a joy to read. Anyways, let's go back to the letter. Look, this started as a love letter, then he's talking to her about evolution, and then he's covering his bases so that the fourth wall readers of this book don't get any racist ideas. Okay, I love this. Anyways, people can be brought up to any human way of life and taught, but human way, don't ya? The races share certain absolutes, which therefore probably are as ancient as the brain or the thumb. Except for you, Roga VII. Except for you, people! What happened on the plains of Andalin, America, after the Ice Age, I cannot tell for certain. I suppose a fresh strain appeared by chance, and survived better than the rest by luck or hardihood, till at last there was an entire new species of mankind. Look, this is a love letter. Don't forget, like, either at this point, the girl must either be tearing the letter up in disgust or flicking the bean. There is no gray area with this kind of autism. I love it. You haven't recognized your uniqueness because, like us, you took yourselves for granted. Yet I believe now your stories are right, that Roga VII and Outlanders can almost never have children together. When they do, these children are sterile mules. I imagine this was an excuse for getting rid of unwanted babies. And it is that, of course. You cloak your motives the same as we do. But I think it's true as well. For my love, consider. Oh my god, she's really flicking the bean reading this. Everywhere else, man is a creature of the pack, the herd, whatever you want to call it. Societies like mine, which give the individual a broad freedom, are rare. And both this freedom and the individual himself are defined by their greater society. Okay. Inevitably, I am misusing language. To you, society simply means a class of foreigners. You know how they vary in, say, Rahid, Arvanet, these are locations in the book, or in the west of the Mooncastle Mountains, blah blah blah. But you make the unspoken assumption that individuals choose individually to live in those styles. So these guys, the anarchic lifestyle, the Anprim lifestyle, is hardwired into these Roga VII in their DNA. Freedom is what you might give excess fish caught in a ware, or something like that. If I told you that it is a, in parentheses, right, remember the Roga VII have no concept of rights, which men have fought and died for, you would stare at me blankly, you dumb bitch. I keep reminding myself this is a love letter, and the overt explanation sometimes sine waves into condescending territory. Anyways, you would stare at me blankly. By, in quotes, individual, I do not mean specific person, but I am not conveying much, am I? Perhaps I can't tell you either how absolutely extraordinary the fact is that you, Roga VII, you lot, have developed a high-level, sophisticated culture as hunters who have never been farmers and have never known, in parentheses, kings. They are so anarchic they don't even know kings. Let me try anyhow to describe you from my outsider's viewpoint. You, Roga VII, by males or females, by nature, by birth, are emotionally self-sufficient. Apart from capturing an occasional invader, he feels no need to compel others to do anything, whether by force or by subtler means, such as he uses on his tame animals. Nor has the Roga VII the slightest wish, conscious or unconscious, to be led. So they are leaderless people. Aside from his beast, I doubt you, Roga VII, are capable of giving or obeying a direct command. You, Roga VII, can't be domesticated. And we saw earlier on, in another chapter, this guy tried to band the Roga VII together into an army so they could stand against the imperial invaders. But they would not understand it. They were unable to comprehend the concept of cooperation. And that was just a detail in the book. But yeah, it's just a strange part of Poul Anderson's intricate Spec Evo world building. Can these people not understand concepts? Are they like in some ways colorblind to them? Or do they just choose not to act that way? That's never clear, but yeah. Anyways, back at the incredible love letter, you, Roga VII, cannot be domesticated. I mean, if somebody told that to me, not a dry seat in the theater. Throughout the rest of the world, humans can be and are. Likeliest, humanity evolved already self-domesticated, a creature not only taught for survival's sake to work within the group and heed its chief, but bred to be this way. Who domesticated the people, you might ask? Maybe it's the same aliens who have turned Mars blue, but anyways, back to Joserek's amazing letter. As humans evolved, those who failed to obey the group were punished until they learned, while the untrainable perished by the will of the group. You, Roga VII, imagine being in love with a girl and constantly calling her people, you lot, you people, you Roga VII. You, Roga VII, cooperate well as long as you are in small, close-knit bands. But if someone grossly fails to do his or her share, or badly offends or endangers you, what is your response? You turn your back. You, an individual, will have nothing further to do with him, an individual. The aggression of your woman, as compared to your man, is another curious thing about you lot, bold though the men are. Well, I think in this book, woman turned out to be more aggressive simply because the protagonist was a man and the love interest was a woman, and we just never got to see Roga VII man in an erotic context. So yeah, that's just a plot detail, but anyways. When the wrongdoer has been cut off by enough people, we get an outrunner, or more probably a miserable death. So these Roga VII are real sovereign citizens. Every choice is an individual choice, but compounded, they become collective customs. Give him some more time, I think Joserek is gonna invent semiotics here because he's just saying the same thing with different words. But anyways, back to the letter. You have no laws in parentheses because remember, the Roga VII cannot comprehend laws, just common sense and a limited amount of custom. The strongest bond on you, I am sure, is the wish to please those persons you care about. You have no trials or judges or judgments, merely arbitrations by mutual consent. Once again, I mean, Poul Anderson makes it sound like a whole different alternative version of humanity, but I think these are interchangeable. Customs and trials are arbitrations by mutual consent. You don't need to be a different species to be able to look at this in another way. But anyways, you have a high measure of self-discipline and I believe a high average of intelligence. Wow, man. Talk to a girl about her people's IQ. But these simply come from natural selection. They who lack them do not live to bring forth young. Okay, wow. And you have a need to open space which is more powerful than your wish for life itself. From this, maybe everything else springs. Your marriages, your arts, your feelings about the land, your whole social structure, your souls. And yet again, I use a Roga VIIian word without being sure what it means because he is a romantic. He wrote the word soul in Roga VIIian. But yeah, once again, I think this is the reflection of the American spirit in the fiction of this book. The need for open space. I've spoken to Americans actually, telling me that, I could never live in an apartment. Why? You need a garden? Okay. Next time some American tells me they can never live in an apartment, I must respond by saying, yes, this wish for open life itself structures everything about your life. Your marriages, your arts, your feelings about the land, your souls. Yep, the clapboard house with a backyard, suburbia, constitutes your souls. Anyways, back at this letter. I don't know whence that need arises, that need for open space. Instinct begs the question, doesn't it? Many animals exhibit territoriality. My kind of human seems to have a weak form of it. Oh, you think? God damn, you have no idea how territorial people can be. Maybe it's not apparent because we live in a civilization, but in a lot of agrarian societies, if you intrude another tribe's land, they kill you right there. So yeah, this is just romantic stuff. I mean, anyways, back at the letter. In Roga VII, it appears overwhelming. That mighty and inborn urge marks you off from me more sharply than any difference in face or form. She's just a wild girl who can't be tied to a place. This reminds me so much of this hippie era song from a band called the Mamas and the Papas that I think that Poul Anderson was directly influenced or inspired by it. The lyrics of that song go, you gotta go where you wanna go, do what you wanna do, with whoever you wanna do it with. And then the girl breaks into the song. She actually has a much better voice than mine and says, you don't understand that a girl like me can love just one man. 3,000 miles, that's how far you'll go. And literally these sappy pappy mamas and papas hippie songs. By the way, the song is called Go Where You Wanna Go. Go give it a listen. I would not be surprised if this song directly influenced the character of Donia from this book. Anyways, going back at the incredible conclusion to this letter. Okay, I think your drive to guard your borders originated as nature's response to the necessity of keeping space around you. But where does it come from? Pheromones? It refers to smells or vapors given off by an animal to influence the behavior of fellow creatures. Think about musk in the breeding season. That's rather a crude example, Donia. I've read how naturalists in my homeland think nowadays that ants and bees work together because of pheromones, laying trails to food, for instance. Among humans, who knows? Maybe you, Roga VII, secrete a substance that, beyond a certain concentration, makes you uneasy. You can't smell the stuff, but maybe beyond a point you begin disliking the actual scent of fellow people, and crowds get you worse and worse, and your whole world seems wrong. Donia nodded thoughtfully. Shaking her head like an obedient little girl. Anyways, let's go on with the letter. Here and why this should be remains guesswork until we know more. Here is a notion from me. When the ice came down, at first there was a terrible want until nature adapted to change conditions and grew abundant again. Meanwhile, a kind of human that had no wish to exist in vast, close huddled numbers could survive better on the plains than the old sort. So he says that maybe people evolved in this new ice age to be more solitary, and then it contributed to the Roga VII being cool, free-roaming mamas and papas hippies. I wonder if my hypothetical subtle fluid is this creation of a body chemistry which has effects more strange than this. I don't suppose you ever thought about it, Donia, darling, but you, almost any woman of your people, is the sexual youth dream of every male of my species, made real in the flesh. Who else could give joy to so many men and enjoy each of them and yet have no morbid compulsion about it, but rather keep active in all fields of life? Very few outlander females, or none, I can tell you. And I think this is Poul Anderson's saving grace, because he tells us that you really need to be not human in order to make this libertarian, boomer sexual freedom lifestyle really work. And you know what? In a way it's true. Okay. But that alone cannot account for how you draw and hold your man. It's nothing you want, I'm sure. In spite of everything, the arrogance, the frequent cruelty, the wantonness, in spite of everything, How innocent you Roga VII women are. You actually warn us. Could it be that substance which makes you what you are enters us likewise? But we are born without a balancing element. You are no danger to men of your own species, are you? Could it be even that this is why you never came to love us as we love you? So these Roga VII girls are chemically addictive. They got that juice coming up in their genital glands. I don't know where else. You just take one smell and you're addicted. Remember that 100-year-old emperor in the throne, and in his dying moments, the last thing he thinks about is, there was this girl I once knew. Okay. Well, the letter is almost over now. Well, dearest one, I'm at the finish. At last, you are likely thinking. But you see, beyond this insight and these questions of mine, which may someday help you, I have no gift to leave. And first I must explain my reasoning before I could tell you what it has led me to, simple though that it is. Oh, come on, get to the point. I may be right, I may be wrong, but here's what fucking... Get to the point! Brevity is a superpower. Everywhere on earth, the letter goes on, humans are domestic animals. Alone in the world and time, Roga VII are wild humans. I don't say good, I don't say bad. The future could be yours, or you could be doomed. Or both of our species could go extinct. We, you and I, will not live to imagine the end. So basically, that's how the book ends, with this love letter. It is weird and tacky in some places, but that's why I love this book so much. Remember, the story is actually really basic. There's a post-apocalyptic world. There's a future ice age, yawn. But there's a hero and there's an evil empire and there's a sexy heroine, and in any other writer's hands this could have been a very mid book. But thanks to his autistically meandering, branching, forking, multidisciplinary approach to world building, Poul Anderson has really managed to make this book, The Winter of the World, a really interesting, thought-provoking and readable one. He sometimes gets tangled up in his own world building like a little kitten playing with some yarn and getting tangled up, but that's good too. I think that's one of the likable things about this book too. And as we have just been listening for the last hour and a half, it's also been keeping us entertained and it has been keeping our noggins jogging. So there you go. The Winter of the World, everybody. If you want to get this book, the link is in the video description for Amazon.com. Also, if you enjoyed my ramblings for the past hour and a half, the link to donate to me on Patreon is in the pinned comment too. Look, I depend entirely on you guys to make these videos. So even $1 a month really makes a difference. Plus, on Patreon, you get to see a lot of free content, new artworks, story revelations, and sneak previews that nobody else gets to see anywhere else. So if you like this, at least go support me on Patreon. If you can't, at least say, leave a comment so we get some traction on the algorithms. Anyways, have you read any other books like this? I would love to know your thoughts on The Winter of the World and on this particular subgenre of sci-fi too. Books featuring post-human species are not very common. I remember another story from this other universe created by S.M. Sterling. It was called Shikari on the Galveston. And basically in this story, in this world line, a comet impacts the world during Victorian times. Only British India is left as the reigning civilization, and together with a competing dark Russia, they kind of divide the world between themselves. And in a lot of different parts of the world, there are different distinct cultures, and in that particular story, called Shikari on the Galveston, by the way, we see a race of orc-like redneck people inhabiting the great swamps of Galveston in Texas. But you see, normally those stories, the post-humans are two-dimensional. They're either villains or, just weird curiosities. I think with this book, Poul Anderson really tried to make the Roga VII work, and maybe he also tried to square the circles of his generation's ambitions, and I think he may even have taken a slight dig at them, because you really can't pull that hippie boomer shit off without losing your humanity. So there's that, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my view of the winter of the world. This has been CM Kozeman. As always, I love you all. Goodbye.